Okay, I'm just going to start by asking the Lord that the message you've given me today will reach the hearts and minds of all of us here today. I'm going to ask you, just for a moment or two, to ground yourselves, to sit comfortably in your chairs, relax your shoulders, come into the now, and just take a few breaths. The emotional toll of the healing ministry. It is heavy. And I'm going to tell you something. It's heavy because we are good at our job. I want to repeat that. It is heavy because we are good at our job. Mark 5:30. Jesus perceived in himself that the power had gone out of him. When we encounter people in that deep and profound way, the power does go out of us. I asked Wes, our director, what he saw as the toll when people are not healed, dealing with an overwhelming sense of responsibility, carrying people's stories and burdens, feeling inadequate yet called, being able to let things go at the end of the day. And I asked a colleague of mine, she said that we might no longer really enjoy what we do or feel reward of any kind from the work we do. We do love what we do. That's why we do it. But the toll is sometimes not feeling that. These are issues that affect us all. The disappointment, feeling we have let someone down, feeling not good enough, taking other people's burdens home, sometimes to the detriment of our families, a loss of faith. These are all hard to bear. We need to learn again and again to leave all these burdens at the foot of the cross and to say, I've done my best. Over to you, Lord. This is the reality of the deep and profound work to which we have been called. It is an enormous privilege, and the power does go out of us. Now, why does this happen? You may think of listening as an ordinary, everyday activity, a straightforward thing you do daily, and it often is. But we're talking about deep and profound listening, not the half listening, the selective hearing that helps us get through the complexities of days. When we listen in a deep way, information is coming into our ears, into our brains, in so many different ways. Listening to someone's story, we are constantly being given more material to be remembered and retrieved. And the longer the story we are being asked to listen to, the more we have to organise, to comprehend and to remember. No wonder listening is energy intensive. And did you know that our brain cells use twice as much energy as our ordinary body cells? When people ask me as a psychotherapist if I just listen, I find it hard to answer. I think of myself as listening on various levels. The story, the backstory, how I interpret the story, what is not being said. And then, of course, whilst all this is going on, I need to be able to continue to hear the story, in the now, so that the person feels I am alongside them and responding appropriately, whilst at the same time I'm trying to make sense of it all inside my brain. And we are also listening for the word of God to come through us. So no, it isn't just listening. So how indeed do we look after ourselves when we're feeling the toll? How do we begin to feel the power again? We know that Christ told us, love your neighbour as yourself. Too often, we ignore the second part of the command, love your neighbour as yourself. Christ is telling us to love ourselves, to look after ourselves. So why is that so hard? We know what we ought to do to live a balanced life. Get enough sleep, blah, 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 get exercise, and we find it really hard to do. What are the messages that we give ourselves, which mean we often look after other people more compassionately, more kindly than we look after ourselves? Selfish, no time, others have to take my burden if I take time off. What is it for you that stops you looking after you? Why is it so hard to show love to yourself? When you leave here today, please have a discussion with yourself why you don't look after you. Sidney Harris said, I don't know who Sidney Harris is, but I like this quote, the time to relax is when we don't have time. Much of this comes down to time. Note all the alarms on the clock. How do we manage all those demands? How do we find time? How do we make time? You might be thinking, Nonie hasn't a clue. She'll suggest things I just won't be able to do. My life is so full I can't find time. Maybe your life looks like this. Full up. Right to the margins. My personal bandwidth isn't wide enough. I've got no space left. All my spaces are leaking. I don't have time for a break. I'm exhausted. Big question. How do we restore our power? Do you remember these old mobile phones? Do you remember we were told that we had to let the battery run right down, or the battery life would be shortened? You know that if we let our personal batteries run right down, it's a long job to get them recharged again. That's what we sometimes call burnout. Now, I've got good news for you. God is a better engineer than Nokia. He doesn't want us to run our batteries right down. He makes batteries inside us that can be recharged constantly in small bursts. And if we do that, our life is extended, not shortened. How good is that? Neuroscience says if we can relax for just 10 seconds, our adrenaline levels, cortisol levels, begin to decrease. 10 seconds, they begin to decrease. And it takes only 15 seconds for the good hormones to begin to work. Now, another type of phone. I expect we all recognise these, a bit more modern than the one I've just shown you. A smartphone. Wonderful tools. They're also the biggest threat to our personal spaces. Instant news, instant Instagram, instant WhatsApp, instant text messages. How easy to respond to that tone, programmed, beep, beep, especially to make us respond instantly. Do you remember that poem, What is Life but Full of Care? We have no time to stand and stare. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we all have tiny gaps in our life. Who's been on a tube? Mind the gap. A friend of mine, when she heard I was doing this, sent that through to me. It means notice the gap. Notice the gaps. These are the crucial times when we can begin to recharge. Where do we find those spaces? Running a bath, boiling a kettle, waiting for a bus, making a cuppa and just sitting with it, waiting for the call centre phone to put you through to a real person. Those 5 minutes you have before you leave home. How do you decide not to fill all those gaps? Let's look again at another page. The same slide, but just a few spaces. A little time to stand and stare, if briefly. I'm asking you that when we notice we have these spaces, don't shrink them. It's easy to find ourselves saying, I'll just check my phone, I'll just do that email, I'll just put the washing in. When you find yourself saying, just pause, become aware. Say instead, I'll just sit and breathe. Many of you will know that the breath in Hebrew, the word for breath is ruach. It's also the word for spirit. So as we remember to just breathe, each time remember we are taking in the spirit of life. Remember, less than 10 seconds to reduce the stress, 15 seconds to begin to feel good. And now we're going to sit here for 3 minutes. If we can make space in today's busy schedule for a 3-minute breathing space, remember you can make space for a 15-second space, a 1-minute space, a 5-minute space. So, it is a beautiful water lily in a vase. But I'm going to ask you just to sit comfortably again. If that feels right for you, close your eyes. Make sure your legs are not crossed and your feet are firmly on the ground. Relax your shoulders. Rest your hands gently in your lap. Now focus on your breathing. Don't try to influence it in any way. Follow the rhythm of the breathing cycle through the inhalation and exhalation. See if you can notice the points at which one phase changes into the next. Notice the pause at the top of the breath and at the bottom of the breath. Your goal is simply to keep your attention on the breath cycle and observe. Do this for a few minutes. When your mind wanders, as it surely will, and when you notice, just come back to noticing your breath. No matter how the breath changes, even if the breaths become very small, just continue to follow them, don't change them. Now expand the field of your awareness around your breathing, so that in addition to the sensations of the breath, it includes the sense of your body as a whole, your posture, your facial expression, If you become aware of some discomfort, simply direct your breath into that place, breathing into it and breathing out of it. And now again, become aware of your breathing. In, out, in, out. Thank you, everybody. I hope you felt a moment of peace in a busy day.